Hi, I'm Brianna with Blossom and Branch Farm. One of my favorite parts of the holidays is having a natural wreath in my house or on my door. I also love the process of making these wreaths. It's really rewarding and fun to be able to personalize your wreath to you. So you can incorporate all kinds of materials. In this wreath today, we're going to be using pine cones, orange slices, a linen bow, and some dusty miller that we've grown here at the farm. So all of these materials are foraged here in Colorado, and we are really excited to be using them. It smells incredible. I'm excited you're going to join me. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to start with, we're going to pull out our paddle wire. So this came in your kit, and this is just a green floral wire, so it blends in really nicely with your wire frame, and it also is very well hidden by our greenery. So you won't see it when you're done, so don't worry about what it looks like too much. So you're just going to pull this out, and then I like to start by making essentially bouquets of greenery. And then I attach those smaller bouquets onto my wire frame. It's just easier to work that way than working with all of these pieces individually. So I usually take about 5 pieces, and it depends on how big and how thick your greenery is, and I use 4 or 5 pieces to make my mini bouquets. So we are using a couple different greens, and I like to use a variety of greens because I find that the different tones of greenery really add some depth and dimension to the wreath. So we have a mix of, this is the Eastern Red Cedar, and then we also have some just basic Noble, and so you can forage this off the bottom of your Christmas tree if you buy a tree. You can go into the woods if you know someone who lives up in the mountains, and you can forage it off of their trees. It does help with fire mitigation to trim off those lower boughs of those trees, so don't worry about damaging the tree, especially if it's just the lower limbs. Just don't cut from the tops, don't cut big chunks off. You just want these smaller pieces. So these have come in your kit pre-cut for you, so you don't have to worry about any of that. But in general, you want to look for a length that's about like this. So I like to look for something that's about 6 to 8 inches long. So I'm going to put those all together, and you do want to make sure that all those greens are facing the same direction. So sometimes, especially with the Noble, it's very obvious which side is the back and which side is the front. And so we want to make sure that all of those front sides are facing the same direction, so that once we layer it onto our wreath, they all look like they're facing the right direction. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and gather a small bouquet of my greens. So something about like this, and you do want it to be fairly flat. So whereas, if we're making a market bouquet, we make it pretty thick and like this, and it's round all the way around. For our wreath, we want it to be nice and flat, so it sits up against that frame. So I'm just going to build my little bouquet, and then I'm going to take my paddle wire, and I'm just going to wrap right around the base, and I'm going to go pretty tightly right around the base of that stem, about 5 to 6 times. You don't have to go really crazy with it. And then cut it. All right, you don't have to leave any wire hanging off of here, just one nice tight bundle. So I'm going to go ahead and make 15 of those because we have our 18-inch wire frame. And so again, for our 18-inch wire frame, I usually find about 15 bouquets or little bunches of this greenery is just about right. So let's go. Okay, so now that we have our 15 bunches, we're going to start attaching them onto our wire frame. So this is where it gets fun. I like to see the wreath coming into shape. And just so you guys know, you can save these wire frames and reuse them every year. You just go along and clip all of this off, and then you can just reuse it. So it stacks. I love these because you can store them in a very small space. You don't have to worry about, storing these huge wreaths. And, you can throw all of these greens right into the compost. So we like to put the greens on this front part, so you can see there's kind of a flat side of the frame, and then there's this part of the frame that sticks out, and that part of the frame that sticks out is going to be the front. So we're going to start attaching, and before we attach, we're going to take our paddle wire, just taking out some old wire, we're going to take our paddle wire and we're going to tightly wind it around, just all the way around this frame. So I just go about maybe 6 times around, 2, nice and tight, and this is just going to help hold everything in place. 4, 5, and then you don't have to worry about tying any knots or anything like that. This is going to be your starting point. Okay, So now that we have that wrapped around, I'm going to start by layering on my greens. Now the first time I do this, if I've never made a wreath before, I would definitely recommend just laying out all of your bouquets on top of your wreath frame before you wire them, so that you can kind of see how closely together you want to space them. You know, if you maybe want it to look a little bit of a thinner wreath, then you'd want to space them a little bit further apart. If you want it to look really nice and full, you could even overlap them a little bit. So just have extra greens around, because in case you want to make extra bouquets, it's always nice to have that option to really fill it out. So once we make our first wrap, this part is pretty self-explanatory. Right from where we wrapped our paddle wire, we're going to just lay that bouquet flat right up on the frame, and we're just going to wrap right around the base. There are different methods of making wreaths. You know, everyone does this a little bit differently. This is just the way that I found is easiest for people who come to the farm and just want to have fun making a wreath. So this fits nice and snugly. This little bouquet fits right into these two middle wires of the frame. So I can really pull this tight, and it pulls that bouquet right up and into the wire frame. So I'm just going to continue going around, building my wreath, adding one bouquet at a time. I like to layer right on top of the stems that I just wired. I'm just going to bring my wire all the way down to that next spot where I'm going to attach. And personally, I don't like to wire too much over this big bulky part of the bouquet, because I like it to be nice and full. If you wanted your wreath to maybe lay a little bit flatter, or for it to be a little bit smaller, then you could definitely wire right over the top of some of this stuff. That would help it lay down just a little bit flatter. But as it is, we don't really need to do this. So, you know, we make a lot of these. You might want to take a little bit more time on your wreath, but we can make them here fairly quickly now. As you're going, you do want to pay attention to, I like to hold it back and look at it every once in a while and just kind of see, you know, what the shape of it is looking like, so that I can make any adjustments as I go if I need to. This is where it's nice to have a helper, maybe someone handing you your bouquets as you go. All right, we're going to do some magical video editing, and we're going to jump to our next section once these are all attached. Okay, so now that we have our wreath put together here, so you can see it's pretty secure, so I do like to pick it up and give it kind of a little bit of a shake and make sure that none of these bouquets are going to be flopping over. If they are, just take your wire and just do a quick little whip around it just to secure it up to the frame. So I have left a little space here down at the bottom of my wreath, or this could be the top too. If you wanted it to be the top, that would be fine. I usually like to put this kind of, have this be the top, and then have my little bow, if you will, here offset on the center. And so we're going to use our Dusty Miller here, and that's going to fill in this little space. So I've left just a little bit of a little gap here for those last little elements. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the Dusty Miller that was included with your kit, and this was cut off the farm. And as you can see, it's pretty floppy because it's December. And so this Dusty Miller has been through quite a few storms and freezes and frosts, but it still looks great. It still has that kind of Christmassy element to it, and so we're going to use this as our ribbon. It's going to look like a natural bow when we're done. So what we're going to do is we're going to trim down all of our Dusty Miller. So if there are any leaves that are sitting lower on the stem, we're just going to pull those off, and we're going to move them up a little bit higher so that we have almost all the leaves on one plane up here. So here's a lower leaf. I'm going to just attach it up a little bit higher so that it kind of goes with this little bouquet. So we're just making one more little bouquet, and it's out of the Dusty Miller. Okay, I have one small leaf down here. I'm just going to pull that off. So pop this one in here. So now you can see I have all the stems down here, and then I have my leaves up here up top. So I'm just going to make one more bouquet out of this Dusty Miller. So I'm going to wrap pretty close to where these leaves start. So I'm going to grab a piece of wire, and I'm going to wrap around just like we did on all those little evergreen bouquets. We're just going to continue to wrap, 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 wrap. And we do want to leave a little bit of stem length here so that we can attach this to our evergreen wreath. You really only need a couple of inches, so if you need to trim your Dusty Miller, you can trim it. So we have one, and then we already tied off our second one. So our second one looks like this, and again, it's okay if they're a little bit floppy. Don't worry about it. Once it gets on the wreath, it's going to work. So these two we're going to put together on the wreath to form our bow on our evergreens. So we've left that little space here, right here, and so you can see we're going to put one bouquet with the stems facing one way and the other bouquet with the stems facing the other way. And so in that way they're forming our little bow. So I like to tuck these actually into the wreath frame, so I'll flip this around so you can see the back side. So I like to actually tuck this through the wreath frame right there. So you can see the stems coming through so that adds some extra security, and then I'm going to wire that into place. I'm going to do the same thing with the other bouquet. It's going to come right through the wire frame. I'll pull it through just a little bit for extra security. Okay, there we go. So here's what that looks like on the front. So now we're just going to go ahead and wire that into place. So we're just going to do just like we did the bouquets. We're going to take a little bit of our paddle wire and we're just going to wire it right to the frame. There's not a really very specific way of doing this. There's honestly not really a wrong way of wiring this, but you do want to make sure that you're going around the bouquet itself, because as these Dusty Miller bouquets dry, they will shrink just a little bit, and so you don't want them to fall off your frame. So we are going to wrap them fairly tightly, and then you can trim these stems when you're done with wrapping, just so that they're not sticking out to making your wreath stick out off your door. Okay, so we've got those all nicely tied off. I am going to give these a little bit of a trim, just a little, trying to make as little mess as possible. Okay, there we go. So now we have our little bow. Now, this is where wreath making gets fun, is with all of the decoration on the wreath. So you can really use your imagination. So you've got your pine cones, you have your dried orange slices. You can incorporate those in any way that you want to on your wreath. So you could either, you could do maybe a little cluster of pine cones here on the bottom bow, or you could even do spaced all over your wreath. You could do that as well. But first I'm going to show you how to wire those in. So it's the same process as we did for our pine cone class. You got to take that one. We're going to take a piece of our paddle wire, and I just cut a bunch of pieces to length, usually about 16 inches long, of my paddle wire. So I have a piece this long. I'm going to take my pine cone, and I'm going to wrap tightly around the base of my pine cone. So right around the bottom, I'm going to go around about 2 times, really nice and tight. So I want to pull it really close up to that inner part of the pine cone. I don't want this wire loose, because then this pine cone might be flopping around a little bit on your wreath frame. You definitely don't want stuff flopping around, especially if it's going to be outside. So we're going to go ahead and wire these on. These ones I'm actually going to space out throughout my bouquet, or through my wreath. I'm used to teaching bouquet classes. So I'm going to place it, and then I'm going to go on the back, and I'm going to slide this wire all the way through the frame. So I'm going to slide it through, and then I'll flip it around so you can see what that looks like. Okay. So here we go. Here's the 2 ends of my wire. Oops, I just lost one. This is a little bit tricky once this wreath starts getting really full, so you can cut these wires a little bit longer to make it easier for you. So I pulled both sides of that wire through, and I'm just going to wrap them together, and I'm just going to twist them off, twist them together. This is all on the back side, so remember you can't see it, and it's green. It blends right in with your wreath, so don't worry about what it looks like on the back. All right, so now that we've got that nice and tight and secure, again, I like to pull it as tight as possible as I'm twisting. Okay. So we have one pine cone on. I'm just going to continue that all the way around, and then I'll show you how to wire in the oranges. So we now have our wreath with our pine cones wired on. You could choose to stop here, or you can go ahead and incorporate the orange slices. Just like with the pine cones, how there's multiple ways for you to personalize this to your own taste, you could do the same with your orange slices. So you could also put these orange slices kind of scattered throughout your wreath if you wanted little pops of color here and there, or you could focus them right in the center of your bow. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to focus them all right here, kind of in the center of my bow. And when you're wiring these, you could also hot glue them, but I do like to use wire, especially for things that are going to be outside, just because, hot glue, as it's exposed to the elements, I find it just tends to maybe have a little bit of give. Just fixing one little piece of my wreath here. Okay, so when you're wiring your orange slices, you do need to be careful where you are wiring it. So you can see I've already poked a little hole right in the side of this orange slice, and I'm going to thread my wire through right there, right up against the rind. So if you try to wire inside the orange, what's going to happen is that this is really delicate. It's very papery and kind of crepey. And so if you wire through this, you're going to end up just ripping right through that orange. So you want to put your wire right through where the rind of that orange is. And these have just been dried in the oven at 200 degrees for about 3.5 hours. Pretty easy to make and makes your house smell wonderful. So I'm going to actually cluster 3 of these together. Like I said, I'm going to do 3 of these, and I'm going to just put them all on one wire. So I'm going to continue to thread my wire through. Again, I'm going through right up where one of these rinds is, right up between the rind. See that wire is so thin. And then I'm going to do all 3 of them that way. And then once I get them on, I'm going to kind of fan them out to where I want them to go. Okay, so I have 3 of my orange slices on my wire, and now I'm going to go ahead and put it through. And again, I want to put mine is going to go right in the middle of where my bow is going to be. And so I'm going to just kind of find what looks like the center, attach those oranges there, and then I'll wrap my wire right around my wreath, and you can see it kind of fans out those oranges already just by pulling that wire around. Can fan them out just a little bit more. I'm going to do the same as when I attach the pine cones. So I just flip it around, I just pull the 2 sides of that wire, and then I just twist them off right there at the back. And it's okay if you have extra wire left over. Again, just keep twisting, make sure it's nice and tight so it doesn't get blown around in the wind. If you want to keep this inside, all the better. It will definitely be a little bit longer lasting for you. So here is our finished wreath. And if you wanted to kind of fan out these orange slices just a little bit, just to show them off just a little bit more, and you actually have more of these included in your kit as well, so you could do both. You could put some here, and then you could kind of place them all the way around your wreath as well. With your bow, you have 2 choices. You could either tie your bow off into a ribbon and attach it onto the front, but I feel like we already have some ribbon going here, so I'm actually going to use my ribbon to tie and to hang my wreath. And so I'm just going to take my ribbon and I'm going to go right through the wire frame at the top. And I'm actually going to tie it in a bow way up here so that when it hangs on my wreath hook, there's a bow right at the top where that wreath hook is. This is just a linen bow, very natural materials. Perfect. So when we hang it, it's just going to give it just one little pop of a bow at the top. But again, if you wanted to, you could also put your ribbon down and make it part of the wreath. So I'll show you how to do that as well. What I like to use is another piece of my wire, my paddle wire just cut right to length. And I'm actually going to tie my bow right around this piece of wire. So I'm going to center my ribbon on my piece of wire, and I'm just going to tie it in a bow right onto the wire. So you can see how this will make it easy. My ribbon slid off. My wire slid right off. Okay, so I tied my knot, so you can see my wire is right there through my knot. And I'm going to make this into the bow. And that's going to make it really easy to just wire this ribbon right onto the wreath. So it's already on the wire. Ta-da! Just like that. We're going to go ahead and attach that. So, you know, you can, again, use your creative judgment here to see where you're going to attach it. Maybe I would put it right down here at the bottom, right underneath. So we'll slide this wire right through, just like we did with the oranges and the pine cones. It's the same idea. You can tell that I'm a mom and I'm used to working without my hands, holding things with my chin. Here we go. So we're going to tuck that right up underneath, and I'm going to pull that wire tight, and I'm going to wire it in on the back, and it's going to stay right there where we put it. All right, so now we've finished our beautiful wreath. Our hands and our houses smell amazing and full of pine and orange and wonderful. Again, at the end of the season, you can take all of these materials off and you can just reuse your frame for next year. I would recommend giving this a little bit of a mist with some water. And the more you can mist it with water, the longer it's going to last for you. Keep it out of the direct sun. I would recommend keeping it, in more of a shady spot, maybe a sheltered spot. Enjoy your wreaths, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, I'm Brianna with Blossom and Branch Farm in Colorado. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, Brianna at blossomandbranchfarm.com.